Our guest today is Marshall Button. He is well known in New Brunswick and in some places across Canada. You may not know that he has been given the Order of New Brunswick, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, thank you for coming, Marshall.
Oh, it's great to be here, Dennis. Thank you.
And taking the time, you're in the middle of one of your tours.
Yes, we're on the road again, to quote old Willie, which is a rather interesting venture when you are in show business. People say, well, what do? You know, you're an actor, you're a comedian, but I always just boil it down to those two words, show business, because that's how I, attempt to cast the stone in the water to earn a living. Yeah. And I'm hoping people show up. Tonight is all nights, because for the most part, it's a pretty basic way to earn a living. You get your uncle's barn, you get a few costumes, sell some tickets, and then you look at how much you sold after.
Yeah. Somewhere in there, thinking that you've been doing this for a while now, 30 years?
Oh God, more than that.
More?
Yeah.
40 years? Goes back to the Comedy Asylum?
Yeah, not quite 40.
Well, you're 39, so how does that add up?
Yeah, exactly. I play this character, which I'm sure will come up, Lucien, which is why I look like this, because that's the character I'm portraying, and it's the one I've done the most. But I started developing this in the 80s, late 70s actually. I worked started probably around 77, working as a summer student in a paper mill in my hometown of Dalhousie on the North Shore. And during that time, I was kind of interested in the theater. I had done it in high school and studied it at that's where we first met, of course, at Bishop's University. We have that in common. But I didn't really know how I would make a career of that. But I kept, instead of like some of my buddies would go try to get jobs working at theaters, like the Piggery Theater and not far from Bishop's. And then there used to be Festival Lennoxville, and you could, there was these odd jobs you could get in theater. But I was more interested in making enough money that I could enjoy my school year. So I'd work in the paper mill at home. And unbeknownst to me, I was gathering a lot of material that I would use later, of course, because I invariably would be working the so-called graveyard shift, the 12 to 8, and 4 in the morning, it's pretty hard to be stimulated, but you're sitting around the lunchroom, and then these guys, they just start, they figured you were no threat to them because you were going to be gone in a couple months, so they would reveal little secrets about themselves, and it was interesting. I became a listener and a psychiatrist almost for some of these guys. So they would reveal things like the guy in my first show, which happens to the character, but he hauls out his wallet and shows me pictures of his kids and says, I lost that, like his kids his wife left him and the kids are gone, but he's indignant about this, and I think, why are you telling me this, buddy? But then, of course, I don't know if the guy's ever seen my show and seen himself revealed there, but many of the things in that first play are verbatim, either things I heard, witnessed, or were part of while I worked in that mill.
That's one of those wonderful things about humor, because you'll touch on a deep human vein and something sad, and somehow you'll bring it some light and some humor and still a real moment, though. That's one of the lovely touches that you've sustained over 30 plus years. Whether it's the character of Lucien, because we can explore that a bit, but also with running the Capitol Theatre down in Moncton, and the work you've done in Ontario, there's a lifetime now of bringing something to people that helps them, be more aware of their own soul, be more aware of their own environment, brings them some joy, brings them sometimes that cathartic sadness. It's a fascinating place to go play. So when you were 18, 19, 20, do you have that vision? Was that kind of clear? That, man, if this works, this is how it's going to be for the next 40 years?
I guess the idea is to always get close to the truth, and the key to be able to sustain a living is if you can make people laugh at the same time. There's a great desire on the part of people to come together in a room and chuckle and help boost their immune system, which of course laughter is thought to be the #1 booster of the immune system, more than anything you can consume or pill you can take. So there is an appetite for comedy, but for my money, and I think you've touched on it, is you make it real first, and people are laughing because it's real, and then after a while they're kind of laughing and saying, should I be laughing at this or whatever, And they recognize the foibles of others, but I think we recognize our own foibles sometime too. And I always say to people, you know, if they're wondering about being funny or how to approach humor, either, you know, in the workplace or with colleagues, and it's getting very difficult. I mean, for comedians, that you better be careful. I mean, a good friend of mine is now the regional manager for Halifax. He was in Moncton, and he made a comment on social media about, you know, one of the counselors, and it was a joke, but then he ended up being you know, had to take a month off work for his, and go to sensitivity, and you know, it seemed fairly innocent, but when you're in that political realm. On the other hand, people always say to me, oh, I could never get away with, you know what, and it's really not, it's me, but when I adopt a persona, when you're an actor, it's not Marshall Button. Yes, Marshall Button wrote the thing, but it's this character, and who is that character, and what does he think? And so you have that license to see that. Mostly it's political stuff, you know, with the premier's done it again, or something's happened in Ottawa or Washington or whatever. But you hear these people, if I go home and I go to the coffee shop or the tavern, and you talk to these guys, you know, there's no holes barred. They will tell you. So the trick is to be able to tell the audience what they told you as portraying that character. So you're not hiding behind it, but it's a way to get to a real truth. And you know, often people say, well, when you travel, you take that show to BC, you change it, eh? Like, you're not like still in the mill. And well, of course you don't change it, because it's only by making something very, very specific and real to that place at that time do you have any chance of being universal. And you know, people think, well, that's kind of a frivolous occupation you're doing, or if you're a writer, you know, what's the point of it's just made up words? But that's all we have as human beings. In fact, most of the great controversies and wars and terrorism and battle are all about words, because they're from books that were written telling the story of Adam and Eve, or Jesus, or Allah, you know. So all of these stories that we take and we make, and now same thing with this so-called fake news, okay? Yes. You know, with this guy who's this clown, you know, orange-haired clown down there doing 132 character messages every day while he's sitting on the friggin' toilet, that are propagating in his mind maybe truths, but you know, as we check the facts, we see that there's a lot of things made up that are either making the world better or potentially turning it into a pile of kindling over there in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You touched on an interesting point. It was about, oh, don't lose it. It was about that awareness of, if you go down to the particular, then that's what makes it universal. I remember taking some writing lessons and playing with writing, because that's a lifetime passion. Yeah. And to go from the general to the particular back to the general as a way of moving your audience through a journey. Yeah. And to do that with humor is very deft stroke. So, and then you get the, is this job serious? You know, 'cause so you've lived a lifetime of, well, why don't you get a real job? Does that resonate a bit? Or you can't make a living at that. In New Brunswick, one of the themes of this show is that you can do amazing things here. We have amazing talent here. We just don't have a place to tell the stories. And you can do it here. And you forged a whole career, more or less, with New Brunswick as your home base.
Yeah, I would say a good 80% of the income I derive in a year is in my home province, and I've sort of been milking that cow a little bit too much, so it seems, you know, not him again. Yeah. But
yeah, but the politicians always change, so you always have new material.
There's never a shortage of material. It's kind of like the hospitals, you know, there's no shortage of customers. Yeah. Yeah, so the material is certainly there, but I guess it's to find that balance of, you know, like I'm alluding to, well, I was here at the Playhouse in November, and now I'm here again in April. 2 different shows. It wasn't, you know, Lucienne, the first one. So I've been able to, fortunately, without really advertising, make most of my living over the last 20 years by showing up at the conference of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Association, or the Royal Architects, or the Zoological Association, CASA, are coming in. So often if there's a national conference that's held in New Brunswick, I'm the the sort of someone who will represent a certain part of New Brunswick, and I'm hired sometimes just to do a show, other times to be there to host, or to be what we refer to as a rapporteur, like to watch the conference and then try at the very end put a humorous spin on all the things that happen, rather than just someone doing a review.
Yeah. So Lucien does slam poetry, does he?
A little bit of that, yeah. And I was here the other night, again, it was a volunteer thing, as a poet. The poet laureate for the Peter Zosky Invitational fundraiser was held at the Sheraton Delta, I guess it is now, Marriott really, but we call it Delta.
Yeah.
There's the 3 plugs for, just done 3 marketing things here.
Mm-hmm.
And on short notice was called upon to write a poem. So I've learned over the years that when someone calls with a request, before you even really give it much thought, you say yes. If it means work, and then figure it out, or can you sing opera? Oh yeah, I could, of course I can't, but you say yes, and then you fake your way through it.
If Adam Sandler can, then you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Opera man from ages ago on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Do you have a highlight buried in there from some of your corporate gigs? Because you have to have that craft of reading your audience too.
Yeah, well,
such different audiences.
Absolutely, and how they react. I mean, I don't know if it's a highlight, but I mentioned Dalhousie and the mill. Of course, there's no mills hardly left in New Brunswick at all. Like the whole front street of Dalhousie is flattened, and they did a good job tearing down the mill. They had a company that took away, and in Bathurst, there's still a lot of remnants. These giant pillars up there. It looks very gothically kind of spooky right now in some of these places. So the remnants of the mills are still around, but Miramichi, they're torn down, the 2 big mills there. And so it's a thing of the past, but in the heyday of the pulp and paper industry, where I was still, getting this character going, where he is a former mill worker in my world, but like so many people are in Dalhousie. Yeah. Within a span of a month, I got to perform for the Canadian Paper Workers Union and also the Pulp and Paper Association of Canada. So I got, one was in Quebec City and the other was in Montreal, and they were big conferences with hundreds of people. So I got to perform for all the union people and all the people who were the sort of, at that time, butting heads with the unions all the time. So one of them is looking like, yeah, you tell them bye, and then the other guy's like, that's why we're in trouble right now. It's guys like that, and their attitude or whatever.
Yeah, you don't want to work yourself out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe that the highlight was in getting laughter from those 2 different perspectives of that character. But in one case, I think it was probably they were laughing with me, and the other they were laughing at me, if you follow me. Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, it's just a constant flexing of the cerebral muscle when you think like, how the heck can I say something? Yeah. For example, I'm coming here. I've got a gig with ACOA, so right away what comes to mind is the Phoenix payroll system. So Lucien would have known somebody who, why the heck did they hire people from the city in Arizona to pay them? Their hockey team's no good. So he's coming up with his old logic about Phoenix.
Phoenix. Because even the name itself is like a little foreboding or foreshadowing.
They hope they rise from the ashes. Yeah. So how do you say something about federal public service? Or I'm doing WorkSafe New Brunswick next month, so I'm meeting them, and so normally what I would do would be somewhere our show that would last in the range of 30 minutes to an hour, and I'll do my 40 minutes of killer material that I think fits them, like I have hours and hours to pick from. Yeah. But then I'll come up with 5 to 10 minutes usually specific to that industry, and there's the challenge. Yeah. And they always appreciate that, and sometimes it works better than others. Yep. But it is, must say, like it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the people with a weak stomach, because think about it.
Well, you'd have to challenge convention, or sometimes you go right into the sore spots.
Yeah, but also, you got a group of people who are there for a conference. They've just heard someone talk about how to, build better bolts for an hour, whatever they're talking about. And they've got a motivational speaker talking to the, unleash the giant in your pants and grab, all this stuff. And and they don't, it's just we do this, and then we go and we have, we have lunch, and then we go get drunk, and then we, and then on day 3 in the afternoon, everybody's half asleep, and then they say, please welcome, and they don't know what's coming.
Yep.
And then there's a guy up there, and they could be somebody who's never been to see a theater show in their life, and I'm up there doing a play.
Yep.
And it's like you only have perhaps 2 or 3 minutes to grab them.
Yeah.
And because you can sense in the room, like, what the F is this going on?
Yeah.
And then once they get laughing or whatever, you got them. But I've had friends who are like, I can't do these gigs, so I say, oh yeah, my buddy there's got an act, and sometimes it doesn't go very well. They say, I'll never do that again, because they could be merciless. But
Yeah.
So it's a good, honest living that way.
Yeah. That also invites conversation about the different audiences. So one of my little pet peeves, in a fun way, is Fredericton could have audience lessons. Because when you watch shows in other communities, or if you've come from other places, seen shows, audiences engage pretty quick to let the performer know we're with you. And they give them some love back early, and then the show amps up because everyone's going. In Fredericton at times, it's like everyone's watching TV.
Yeah.
It's like, get off your hands, like give them something. Remember once watching a classic albums live, it was Jimi Hendrix, 22-year-old kid, looked like a Beatle more than Jimi Hendrix, white boy playing the lead on the classic albums live. He was flying on this one solo. I jumped out of my chair and I'm applauding like this. I'm the only one standing up. The guy gave it, it was awesome. You say, oh, I feel it, give it back.
Yeah.
My son was sitting 3 or 4 rows back with his girlfriend. After the show, he said, that's okay, Dad. There was one other guy, after you jumped up, he jumped up too, and he gave something back.
Well, it spoke to you at that moment, I guess. But
So here you are traveling around the province, and I wanted to ask sort of at the beginning, it's like, does New Brunswick have a funny bone? Yeah. And then do different communities have different funny bones?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd say the best audiences, just because there usually are so many of them, and they have an appetite for it, I'd have to say number 1 place is Miramichi. Yeah. And again, there are people who don't take themselves too seriously, and it's a place known for its, at times, violent behavior. But again, that shows passion, right? It's like, how you doing, buddy? Good. You want to fight? And it's right away, like you're just in the middle of it. And it's like years ago, we used to travel around the province doing these annual reviews, like of the Hubcap Comedy Review. So we'd be kind of looking at the year that was and different world events and putting them on. And there's always something in the shows that that the actors or the people who create it think this will kill, it's great, and they love it, and the audience will go, what the heck is that? And there's always other things that you think, well, we'll do this, and of course it's a big hit. Yeah. But we did this one thing, and my friend John McMaster, who kind of was a producer and one of the head writers on the project for years, he just put together this montage, and it was the year 2004, where we were celebrating the arrival of Champlain and Dumont at St. Croix. So we did this historical thing, but then in there we did this weird skit about a takeoff on the like Riverdale, like the Archie comics, and it was set in the Miramichi, and it was Archie and Reggie were little scrappers, and then Jughead and Betty, and so I just thought this was hilarious, and we were going around. It was just kind of like, hey Archie, hey Reggie, you want to go? And then they go behind the flat and you'd boom, boom, fight. And we had these like mannequins thrown in the air, and it was just like fights all the time. And they're all black and blue. And then Betty and Veronica come in, they have a scrap, and it's going. And we're going all over the province, and it was like people just kind of giggled a little bit. But I couldn't keep a straight face. And then we get to Miramichi where it's set, like, it's. And of course they're in the middle of a big scrap, and then the church bell rings, and they go, okay, let's stop, we got to go to mass. Yeah. But anyway, we do this in Miramichi, and they go ballistic, like they're laughing, they're falling on the floor, and here it is, you're just taking the mickey out of them, Yeah. And that's what's so beautiful about New Brunswick, is that it is why I choose to stay and live here, is of all the places you could be, it is the one place. And to me, this is a sign of, maturity, of sophistication, of comfort in oneself. It is the best place on the planet for people laughing at themselves. Even more than Newfoundland, which people think is great that way. Yeah. The people, particularly where I'm from in the north, like they don't really, there's a kind of sense of humor about they don't take themselves seriously at all. Like you can say it comes from a bit of inferiority complex, but it's more self-deprecating than in being inferior. Like when I was a kid, there was an Acadian mayor, and that wasn't always the case, even though the town was like 50-50 English. It was usually the bosses of the mill were from New York, and other places, and so it was always the English people in charge. So it was great to have a mayor. But I remember this one there, and my father would tell the story. His name was Arsène Alain, and so Arsène was the mayor of Dalhousie for 1 or 2 terms in the early around the time of Louis J. Robichaud. And the guy said, "Oh, there's nothing up here in the North Shore, you know. Oh, Judge, we've got nothing. We're the Arsène of the world." He said, "Even the mayor's name is Arsène." So that's an example of we don't take ourselves too seriously, I guess, and I like that. I think it's a good way to be. The other night at this event here in Fredericton, I was sitting at a table with Kathy Rogers, our Minister of Finance, and there were a few other politicians there, and we were having conversation because that's what I'm expected to do, and get up, and she was "You're not going to say anything about me," and I mean I didn't have anything to say about her, but she is genuinely fearful of being made fun of, whereas other politicians, not the case at all. Yep. She really, anyway, and we got talking a bit, and I was telling a story about when it was the Sean Graham government. The province hired me to go to Ottawa with them to host this event at the National Gallery.
I think I saw a video clip about that.
Okay, and so I'm there as the host. And there's all these senators, New Brunswick senators and senators from other parts of the country, and all these ambassadors and diplomats from various countries, including some people from the Middle East. And so here I am, the purpose of it was to showcase New Brunswick. We were showing little vignettes and clips. And then I get to do this monologue, and I proceed to take the mickey out of the government and the premier who's in the room.
You do what you do. So it was Sean Graham Cracker, was it?
He was Sean Graham Cracker, and there was poor Sean, and was talking about the stupid thing he's trying to sell, NB Power, and he's the Power Ranger premier and all this, and going to transform to the private sector pretty soon. All these,
Open for business.
Yeah, we're open for business, all right. So anyway, I do this, but then after the thing, like there are all these diplomats from places like Lebanon and Turkey, and they're kind of like shocked. They understand English really well, and they're saying to the people from the province, like, "Do you know that man would have been put in jail?" And I would have, but that to me speaks of how great our country is and how great our province is, that not only can I do that, but I can do it by the very people that hired me to come to be in the room, So
that's powerful, though, Marshall, what you just shared, that you have the ability and the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And in its own way, it's also celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
So how powerful is humor, not just for healing, but that sense of, it's like soul, it touches into the soul, and then the province can have soul.
Yeah.
Because you're also, in some ways, in what you're sharing, which is awesome, is you're showing part of what New Brunswick is. Mm-hmm. So we're known as a pass-through province, or the nicest province you never saw, or when you do any hiking down at Funday Park, for example, you can run into people and you ask them, "Why are you guys here?" And they'll go, "Oh, we like it because no one knows it's here."
Yeah, it is.
That lovely irony. So you're also carving out part of who we are by being that ambassador or spokesperson or representative with that.
Yeah, even though, one of my most signature bits is going through the New Brunswick Tourist Guide and, making fun of I was making fun about poop in the water of Parley Beach long before it became front page news every day. Yeah. But there's nobody more passionate and in love with this province than me, and it's precisely that. I think you can have fun with it in the end. When I'm talking seriously to people, and I travel a lot, for my work and other things, and you talk to Canadians, and you're in Saskatchewan, and they'll say, "Oh, we've been there, we've been everywhere, all through the East Coast," and then they kind of, will just say about New Brunswick, "We were there, but they were, as you say, passing through on the way to Peggy's Cove or PEI." But really, we have everything here. We've got the most fabulous beaches. I know we've got different variety of them. You want the big sand dunes at Cushbuquac, and if you want to swim in urine and
Parley.
And excrement there, you can go to Parley Beach and be warm.
And they're building new campgrounds down there.
Yeah, they got mega. Yeah, recusement. Here we come. But or if you want to go, you've got the highest mountain in the Maritimes, that Mount Carlton, and there's so many untapped, as you say, that most people in New Brunswick haven't seen, like this lower St. John River Valley. When you drive down there, all these Hatfield Point and...
It used to drive me crazy. I used to live in Browns Flat.
Oh, there.
So you got the 7 ferry boats in and around. And I'd watch the Brunswick Tourism stuff. This is in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And to this day. And they'd promote Upper St. John River Valley up to Woodstock. And these great pictures. And no. If you're from Toronto or Boston or New York, and you're pounding around on the road and you need to do a bit of a tour for 2 days, 3 days, you go down the lower St. John River Valley and you can map it all out and take this ferry over here and then follow the show, take that ferry there. You could do this lovely loop from the Kingston Peninsula down the Long Reach, Grand Bay, and all that's free. And especially spectacular is going to Deer Island.
Oh my gosh.
And taking that ferry over to Deer Island.
Yeah.
You know, if you're from downtown Boston and you get on that little flatboat with the 25 other cars, you know, and get around the wolves and do that, that's stunning.
It is.
But you know, you must have some material stored away or to be used one day for the lack of signage on the Trans-Canada Highway to pull people down to see the amazing things, whether it's down Funday Coast or whether it's up to the Acadian Peninsula. Because that highway really is built for getting people through this
and
province
that's what
as
it
quick
is.
as
And
possible.
it was certainly, I think you know, people say, because I live in Moncton and I'm always in Fredericton, it seems, you know, once a week. And then when I've done, like I worked, for example, at Theatre New Brunswick, and I was commuting, you know, I wouldn't do it for a whole year, but for the 2 or 3 weeks, it's fantastic. I mean, the people in Toronto, an hour and a half, that would be a great thing if it only took them an hour and a half, you know. So that's kind of what it takes me door to door when I was working on jobs like that. So you appreciate it, but you're right. It was a reaction to all the fatalities that had happened, especially on that awful, what we call the Trans-Canada between Moncton and Fredericton there through Sheffield and all. You know, it was beautiful along the river. Now you can still take the old road, but yeah, it's all about sort of moving, you know, potatoes in and out of the province and you know, making it efficient to transport goods out of here, you know.
It would be fun to conjure up our own advertising campaign for New Brunswick Tourism, and what this, you know, with technology nowadays, you can make a sign look like it's really there, even though it's not there.
Exactly.
For getting down to the Bay of Fundy or getting off to other beautiful spots to go see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, or we turn this conversation or this part of it into a podcast, because I can tell you, we're on the tour with this lad. He's 29 years old. And I have my 2 oldest children are 29, and our son will be 27 this year. So I'm well aware of that, you know, demographic who are kind of eventually are going to take over things and rule the world. So, you know, forget about television, forget about even conventional radio, but do a really good podcast, or find a way to get your message on Instagram, or you know, and you know, and also the way that, like, I was involved in a major marketing campaign for the province last summer, in June of 2016. I was in Toronto, and we did this mock event, and it sort of became a viral YouTube thing where these people in Toronto thought they were there for a focus group about what they'd like to do with travel and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't know who the client was, but that was all fake. They had all these TV cameras in there. And at a certain point they say, well, we just have to take a break and talk to the client who's supposedly in the back room. But meantime, they invited all these people. Most of them were ex-Frederictonians who were living in Toronto, people from around New Brunswick who were back there already, you know, consuming copious amounts of beer and other things. Yeah. And then I come in, I got my bag, and I come in and I'm saying, hey, you know, I'm supposed to meet some people here, and then all these people look shocked, and I said, and then finally I say, they're on a certain queue, I said, I walked all the way from Union Station, and I'm all getting all upset, and then I say, I thought I was here for a party, and on the word party, there's these black curtains that open up there, and who's behind there but Matt Anderson,
all right,
jamming away, playing, and all of these New Brunswickers come in with trays of, you know, lobster and all this stuff, and fiddle, all the, you know, and Alpine beer, and they're going around, and then so I announce, oh, this is just a gag we're doing, you're here for a party, and here's a kitchen party put on by the province. So then they're filming all this, and then Matt takes a break, and then I get up again and thank them, and then I say, oh, well, before you go, we just have a little thing, is that you've all won a free trip to New Brunswick. And then they go, and this is genuine, like they're not acting, so they're going, ah, you know, and they're just these people from Toronto who, you know, hitherto would, you know, were wouldn't say shit if their mouth was full of it kind of people, but they're
Yeah.
screaming their heads off, and we're capturing this. So then, of course, they make this video and they post it, and it, yeah, hundreds of thousands of allegedly hundreds of thousands of people, according to what's on the YouTube. So this is how we market things now. This is how we get our messages across, I think, is we find ways, and again, we were kind of just having some fun, but then, in the person's mind, they're being entertained by Matt and the things that they see, and the jokes that I might say, but they're thinking, this is a fun place, I'd like to be there. And in the meantime, we're getting subtle messages because the people are looking through these virtual reality glasses of the Hopewell rocks and all that stuff. Yeah, but there's more to New Brunswick than those friggin' rocks too, aren't there?
Yeah. There's that. But just traveling that Trans-Canada Highway, there's some stats that show 400,000, 500,000 cars come through on the number 1 and the number 2, getting to PEI in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And they get some of their information, maybe not all, but an awful lot of it just from driving the road.
Yeah.
And there's no sign up there for Hopewell rocks, like a picture, like a big billboard with a picture like they use in the TV ads.
Yeah.
A fun old story about tourism was, it was in the 80s. New Brunswick was heavily marketing warmest shores north of Virginia, but it doesn't tell you where. It just says warmest shores north of
Warmest
Virginia.
waters north of the Carolinas, they're thought, or something.
That kind of thing.
But technically, that would be 1 foot north of the border of Carolina, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But this lady had come up from somewhere in the States on the number 1, came through St. Stephen, saw the water, saw one of the beaches, goes peeling in. It's Bay of Fundy. It's like 50 degrees or something for her.
Yeah.
She was so, how you learn about it, she was so upset. She wrote letters to the editor, which then made the rounds long before the internet world about false advertising in New Brunswick's part.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're so familiar with our own turf, we struggle with how others might see us.
Yeah.
So maybe one of our slogans could be the nicest province you never saw.
Yeah, maybe.
Or I didn't know that. Because when you travel across Canada, New Brunswick, where's that? No, I didn't know that about that place.
Yeah, that would be an interesting approach, because people love the whole satire, irony, and just to make people take notice of us that way. But again, that's part of the appeal, that you can go like on this, something I've never done is the new Fundy Trail there, so I got to do that this summer. And
because if our plates say be in this place, but people don't know where that place is, you kind of lost one of your hooks. Right?
Yeah, we get them to stop to pee in this place, that's about it, and they're on their way.
Fun.
Yeah.
To take a different turn, running the Capitol Theatre, how many years now? Decades now?
It's 20 years since we moved back to New Brunswick, and gone through a few premieres since then. But I originally came to take over as the manager, shall we say. I wouldn't say I run it now. Like after about 3 years, it had a bit of a rocky start, and I came in and I realized, well, I just need someone to kind of be there and be nice to people.
Coach
And
it through.
yeah. So I thought, well, I would leave this. I came in fall of '96, and by the year 2000, I thought, well, this is good. Seems to be running well. And I said to the board, I'd like to leave. I think I'll leave because I'm really want to keep with my performing and creating career. And then so maybe we could figure out a way to kind of keep you here. So they created a position in the year 2000 called Artist in Residence. Okay. And usually that's something that would last maybe a year, maybe 2. It's like year 17 of this gig now. But I do a lot of things there. I'm still, I'm involved in the programming where, I don't make the decisions, but as I travel, I'll go see shows if I'm in other places, and, and I've had a lot of experience of working with different artists through, some of these shows I've been in. So I help with that, and I'm the chair of the Health and Safety Committee of the theater, and I'm very involved. We have a theater school, and that's part of what I do. So it's continuing to provide me with this anchor that keeps me close to my family once in a while.
Isn't that great? Yeah, an anchor is a good description. Is the business doing okay? As facilities management, you try to keep it busy, as many days a week as possible.
Yeah.
We've got the 3 in New Brunswick mainly, with the Capitol, the Imperial, and the Playhouse. You guys do work together on booking acts from time to time, because it's small market, so you got to get 3 or 4 gigs for the artists as they tour Atlantic Canada. It seems like not really a renaissance, but something has shifted. the past 10 years or so, there seems to be a lot of choice now, or more. Does that ring true for the capital?
Well, I mean,
is
you
there a lot
mentioned
going on in
we
there?
have 3 major performing art centers now just in Moncton. And I know the people at the Imperial were very upset when the casino opened, because that would be competition for them, and they see it as, you know, people from St. John driving to Moncton and checking a show at the casino. So there were a lot of shows going there that had been coming to the capital, and then there's this new celebration center with the Wesleyan Church, and they have like 1,700 seats, so they're hosting 30, 40 performances, and now they're talking about saving the old Moncton High School and making a major performing arts center there. The one thing it's done, it's kind of like when you're running McDonald's and Burger King moves across the street. It's making us work really hard, it's making us very nimble, and it's never, ironically, the capital's never had more customers, or never gone better since these other places have opened up.
So to me, that's one of those cultural shifts. And when speaking with business people, I get a little flustered while trying to give them the space to say their thing. It's like competition. And in their business or their perspective is like competition's bad. Rather than you've created a culture. So the restaurants should have a restaurant association, and food should be one of the main drivers for tourism in New Brunswick, because you already integrated it into your storytelling. So come for some of the finest food east, east of Quebec, that kind of stuff, because we have that. We just don't share and do that. But the first breakthrough has to come with a group of people recognizing they're not just in competition with each other, but in that community, they're creating a whole culture of activity that makes it a fun place to live.
Absolutely.
And now you've got, in Moncton specifically, you've got that new big honking center that's going to open downtown.
Oh, the
at some point
entertainment
in
center is
time.
another thing, and then that's going to be bringing in umpteen shows, and they have smaller performance spaces in there. So Moncton has really positioned itself as the so-called entertainment capital of the province, and it can easily live to that moniker with all the big concerts. I mean, we haven't had any for a couple of years, but of course with the Stones and the U2 and all those big things at the site there. So we're just kind of riding that crest, but ultimately the main audience tends to be people from within the province, specifically from southeastern New Brunswick. Interestingly is because we have such a strong Acadian culture and Francophone presence, they, as the former mayor used to say, they punch above their weight when it comes to attending events. And the last couple of years I've embarked on doing these mega musical things. So $240,000 budget, big musical with professionals. Everybody gets paid. We did Sound of Music one year, and then this year we did Oliver. And so we'd have between 5,000 to 6,000 people come and see this show over the week that it runs. And you need that. It worked out well. In fact, we broke even and better on it, but with buy-in from the corporate. Royale Tissue is a major sponsor. The province helped us, but you can say, well, that's a stupid investment putting in the arts. Okay, well, our box office alone was $170,000. So if the province gives us $25,000, just the box office HST that we collect has paid them back. Never mind the people who are downtown in February, packing the restaurants, having a drink before and after, staying in a hotel. People were visited from Miramichi, they were from Nova Scotia, Spring Hill, coming to see these shows. So it's a great, it's not just an investment, it's a payback to,
You've got it. There's Richard Florida, when he was first breaking out his notions of the creative class, and he's now a star at University of Toronto, but it's about demographic shifts and trends. Was hired to do a study in Pittsburgh of an IT company, why they couldn't retain their 25 to 35-year-olds. And to do the short version, he tracked where they went. They were all moving to Boston. And even though the compensation package back in Pittsburgh was really good, so he went back to his company and said, what I've learned from the people that went to Boston is Boston's a more fun place to live than Pittsburgh. So you want to do a retention strategy, you want to have a shift. It's not pay, it's create your community as a vibrant, fun, awesome place to live with lots of stuff to do. And Pittsburgh, now 15 years later, has achieved that. Its reputation has shifted. Moncton offers that for the whole province when you've created a buzz there. With all those things. So the capital will find its niche somewhere in the mix of all these other pieces that draw people in. And interesting you talk about the cultural differences too, because the Francophones do have that joie de vivre with wanting to celebrate and humor and connection with food. So there's a difference in the audiences, maybe.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they're great. I mean, we were, performed last night in Florenceville, and there's a few references to the big burly truckers in the audience, Day and Ross, the two of them sitting in the front row. But everybody ultimately, there's only about 6 jokes that have ever been written, and everything else in humor is a variation of those 6. You're either surprised, or you've been reassured, knowing what sometimes that punchline's coming, and it comes, and you laugh even more because it's like you're writing it as it goes. But it's either like the Shaggy Dog story, or things happen in threes, always with a joke, that this and the third time he went, bing, and there's the punchline. So everything in humor is kind of down to that. It's just how you make it fresh, and how you are managing to surprise people into that great thing, which is the drug that everybody in my profession craves more than everything else. Is Leonard Cohen was there for, he said, a woman's kiss, but I'm there for an audience's laughter. Yeah.
Do any influences? I mean, it's sort of an obvious question. Was there not really George Carlin style?
Well, you know what?
Those observations on life.
You know what? You say that. I was about in. And it speaks to, God bless my parents, and my mom's still alive, but they were traveling somewhere. I would have been in about grade 7, I'm going to say 12, 13 years old, 7 or 8 at tops. And they come home with this, we had one of those big wooden honkin' stereos. And they come back with a record, George Carlin, 7 words you could never say on television. Brilliant, And this is for you, Marsh, because they kind of knew the way my brain worked then. And as these god-awful, words, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and they're, what? And it's like, I'm listening to this, and then I go to school, my first year of high school, and I have to write an essay, and he said the topic is pollution. So I write an essay in grade 10, and this teacher had just graduated from Teachers College here in Fredericton. It's his first month on the job. He's teaching, and this kid that he doesn't know,
button kid in the class,
who writes an essay on, it's called Filthy Noise Pollution at Dalhousie Regional High School. And I'm writing about, it's really disturbing to walk down the aisles of this high school and hear someone say, the teacher can kiss my arse, that kind of, and I was writing all that, so I basically ripped off George Carlin and wrote a list of all the kind of polluting words that were in the hallways, and I put it as a form of pollution. So this guy, and it was an essay, and he put 0 on it. And so I went to see him, and we sat down and talked, and I explained my thesis. And he was hip enough, by the end he gave me 100 on the essay. So again, so actually George Carlin was a major influence, and continues to be. But the other night, I had never really seen him. I'd seen him in a movie and stuff. The young Kyle, who I referred to earlier, had up on the Netflix there, the Netflix, as our older folks say, this Louis C.K. that was from 2017. He's pretty amazing too. Like I don't really consume that much comedy, but as a stand-up, and again, very dark, very kind of, first thing he talks about is, I don't know what I think about abortion, and then people are, what? And he goes on and he does this killer material about, as he says, killing babies, and manages to, you think, where's he going with this? And manages in the end, to weave this great story to get you to buy in. So, yeah, I think certainly you don't have to go far from home to get inspiration. In fact, I always used to say I was really only the 3rd funniest person in my family. My dad was born in Newfoundland, and my grandfather was a veteran of World War I, so he died in 1942, and my dad was about 16 and had to quit school. He was in high school, and go work because the family owed hospital bills to the Soldiers Memorial Hospital in Campbellton, and the reason why my grandfather was sick was because he was gassed. As Sean Spicer says, not even the Germans use gas. Yeah,
yeah, right.
But he was gassed in World War I, And would never, you know, they always say he died. He was 50 years old, and his nickname was Old Charlie, you know, from the time because he. Anyway, so that, you know, my dad, who could have been anything, he could have been a great comedian because he was. Anybody, everyone said that. So he was very funny. And then my mom, who was francophone, had a great storytelling, and she taught special developmentally delayed students. So in those years, and I would go in, I always had my lunch with her and the kids because it was in the same school or near our school, and so she would get up and do impersonations of the kids and the crazy things they said, and oh my God, you know. So I had her, and then my dad, and then my brother, who's just naturally funny, and he doesn't know it, kind of thing. So, you know, you just find inspiration everywhere, and it's, you know, the two of my uncles, like, they could have been the funniest stand-ups in the world, like this, but, you know, one guy, you know, drove a truck, and the other guy was a pipe fitter, you know. So yeah.
Yep. We have about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
We're at an interesting time in the shifts in the world, put it that way, whether it's American politics, Canadian politics, but you can't miss that there's a shift going on. And when the old models start to break down and the old systems start to break down, new ones need to come up. There's many who would say it's the artists, the poets, and the comedians who will help guide us through those transitions, because they will help us remember who we are and help us be authentic to ourselves. Do you have any sense of that happening? Because you can speak to truth like other people can't speak to a truth.
Yeah.
And you offered that earlier. Do you see that coming? Because you lightly touched on some Trump stuff and then left it, because we could go 10 hours on that. But at the heart of it, for a whole province, for a community, there is something about the humorist and the comedian, and help us remember who we are and keep us authentic to ourselves.
Yeah, I think, yes. I mean, I don't want to get too grandiose and say that we can play a role in, you know, making change so much as we're there to tell the story. You know, if it comes to a point where we're all, you know, just left to sticks and stones and a pile of rubble, we'll be telling it, you know, orally as we used to 1,000 years ago. And that, I think that figure of the jester, of the clown, of the truth teller will always play a role, even if, you know, the jester might have gone too far in the past and got their head chopped off. I fear that it's coming to that now, you know, with the muzzling of the press, of the thin-skinned of this, you know, Trump, for example, who is the first, other than when, of course, Reagan was shot, you know, think of it, first president to not go to the writers' dinner that they have there, whatever it's called.
The press dinner?
The press dinner, the Washington press dinner. First time ever, you know, just wouldn't show up. So that, to me, is pretty frightening. So yeah, there is a role to play, and unfortunately for someone like him, who's a megalomaniac, how the hell he ever got to where he did, you know, that's a whole other 3-hour talk that we're going to have someday. But the role to play is to hopefully influence the minds of people who might be out there to vote again, you know, if we ever have a chance to vote again. So it's scary times. I know we're leaving on a very optimistic note here.
You know, but bring it back to New Brunswick too, because New Brunswick has all these gems, and it seems like we're slowly raising our own awareness about ourselves.
Yeah.
And yourself and characters like Tom Swift, or the work that Suzanne Alexander does at Goose Lane, or Carrie Lee Powell, who will be a guest on the show one day with her writing, they help us find our way. Mm-hmm. So Lucien, in his own way, might be a lot bigger than just the guy from the mill.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see. You know, ultimately it's about selling tickets and getting bums in seats. So I view people watching this, if I'm doing a show somewhere, just remember that I got to eat too, eh?
Well, on that note, why don't we stop? That'd be great.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers, thank you. And thank you for watching. There'll be a series of links on the YouTube post underneath and on my website that'll tie to Marshall's website and the Capitol Theater website and anything else that looks like it'd be fun for you to watch. So be good, have fun, love each other.